The rain came down in sheets, drumming against the windshield of our old pickup truck as it rattled along the winding Oregon highway. I gripped the steering wheel, my knuckles white, while Ethan sat beside me, his breath fogging the passenger window as he stared into the endless blur of pine trees. We were supposed to be on a romantic getaway, a stolen weekend to escape the world that didn't understand us. But something about the storm felt like a warning. My name is Caleb, 26, a mechanic from a small town outside Portland where everyone knows your business and whispers it louder. Ethan, 32, is a high school history teacher with a smile that could melt steel and a secret that could ruin him. We'd been together for a year, hiding our love behind closed doors and coded glances. Because in our corner of the world, being gay wasn't just a scandal, it was a risk. This trip to a remote cabin in the Cascades was our chance to breathe, to be free, to be us. But as the road narrowed and the forest closed in, I felt a prickle of unease, like we were being watched. "Relax, Kel," Ethan said, his voice warm but strained, his hand brushing my thigh. "It's just a storm. We'll be sipping coffee by the fire in no time." His hazel eyes caught the dashboard light, and for a moment, I believed him. But then the truck hit a slick patch, skidding wildly. I yanked the wheel, heart pounding, and managed to steady us. Ethan laughed nervously, but the sound died as we both saw it, a figure in the road, cloaked in shadow, gone as quickly as it appeared. "Did you see that?" I whispered, my voice barely audible over the rain. Ethan's face paled. "Yeah, probably just a deer, right?" But we both knew it wasn't. The figure had been too tall, too human. I pressed the gas, urging the truck forward. The cabin only a few miles away now. The air in the cab grew thick with unspoken fear. Ethan reached for my hand, his fingers cold but steady. "Whatever happens, we're in this together," he said, and I nodded, though my gut twisted with dread. The cabin was a rustic thing, tucked in a clearing surrounded by towering firs. We parked, grabbed our bags, and ran through the downpour to the porch. The key was under the mat, as promised by the rental agency, but the door creaked ominously as we pushed it open. Inside, it smelled of damp wood and something else, something metallic, like blood. Ethan flipped the light switch, but nothing happened. The power was out. "Great," I muttered, fishing a flashlight from my bag. The beam cut through the dark, revealing a cozy interior, a stone fireplace, a worn couch, a small kitchen. But the shadows seemed to move, and the silence was too heavy. Ethan lit a fire, the crackling flames casting flickering light across his face. He looked beautiful, but scared. "Caleb," he said softly, sitting beside me on the couch. "This trip is not just about us getting away, is it? You've been jumpy since we left." I hesitated. He was right. I hadn't told him everything, hadn't told him about the anonymous note slipped under my apartment door 2 days ago. "Leave town or else." I thought it was just a cruel prank. But now, in this isolated cabin, felt like a threat closing in. "It's nothing," I lied, forcing a smile. "Just tired." He didn't buy it, but he let it go, leaning in to kiss me. His lips were warm, grounding, a reminder of why we were here. For a moment, the world was just us two men stealing a piece of happiness in a world that didn't want us to have it. But then a loud crack echoed outside. Not thunder. Not a branch. But something deliberate. Ethan froze, his eyes wide. "Stay here," I said, grabbing the flashlight and a poker from the fireplace. My heart hammered as I stepped onto the porch, the rain soaking me instantly. The beam swept the clearing, catching glints of wet leaves and something else. Pair of eyes, reflective like a predator's, staring from the tree line. I stumbled back, the poker slipping from my hand, and ran inside, slamming the door. "Someone's out there," I gasped, locking the bolt. Ethan's face drained of color, but he grabbed a kitchen knife, his teacher's calm replaced by something fierce. We stood back to back, listening to the storm and the silence between its roars. Then came a knock at the door, slow, deliberate, like a countdown. "Who's there?" I shouted, my voice cracking. No answer. Just another knock. Heavier this time. Ethan gripped my arm, his breath ragged. "Caleb, what did you get us into?" I didn't know. But as the knocking grew louder, I realized this wasn't just a romantic trip anymore. It was a fight for survival and for the love we'd fought so hard to keep. The knocking stopped, but the silence was worse. It pressed against the cabin walls, thick with menace, as if the forest itself was holding its breath. Ethan and I stood frozen, his knife glinting in the firelight, my poker raised like a shield. "Caleb," he whispered, his voice barely a thread. "What do we do?" I swallowed hard, my mind racing. The note, the figure in the road, the eyes in the dark, it was all connected. But how? I hadn't told Ethan about the threat, and now it felt too late, like confessing would only make things worse. "We stay calm," I said, forcing steadiness into my voice. "We check the windows, secure the place, and wait for morning." Ethan nodded, but his eyes were sharp with fear and something else, doubt. He moved to the nearest window, peering through the rain-streaked glass. "Nothing," he said, but his shoulders stayed tense. I checked the back door, making sure the lock held, then wedged a chair under the handle for good measure. The cabin felt like a trap, its walls too thin against whatever was out there. We returned to the fire, sitting close, our weapons within reach. The flames crackled, but they couldn't drown out the storm or the memory of those eyes. "Tell me the truth," Ethan said suddenly, his voice low but firm. "What's going on? You've been acting like you're expecting something bad since we got here." I looked at him, his face half-lit, half-shadowed, and my chest ached. He deserved the truth, but the truth could break us. "Someone left a note at my place," I admitted, my voice rough. "Told me to leave town. I thought it was just small-town hate. You know, people who don't like." Ethan's jaw tightened. "And you didn't tell me. Caleb, we're supposed to be in this together." "I know," I said, reaching for his hand. He didn't pull away, but his fingers were stiff. "I didn't want to scare you. I thought we could just escape for a weekend." "Escape?" He laughed bitterly. "We're in the middle of nowhere, and someone's out there. This isn't escape, it's a nightmare." Before I could respond, a loud thud hit the roof, like something heavy had landed. We both jumped, Ethan's knife clattering to the floor. I grabbed the flashlight, aiming it at the ceiling. But it revealed nothing but wooden beams. Then came another sound scratching, slow and deliberate, moving across the roof. "We need to get out of here," Ethan said, his voice shaking but resolute. "We can't stay trapped like this." "And go where?" I snapped, fear making me sharp. "The truck's out front. But we don't know what's waiting. We need a plan." Ethan's eyes flashed with frustration. "A plan? Caleb, we don't even know what we're up against. This isn't just some random creep. It feels personal." He was right, and that scared me more than the noises. Whoever was out there knew we were here, knew what we meant to each other. I thought of the note again. The scrawled words burned into my mind. Was this about us being gay? Or was it something deeper? Something tied to Ethan's past or mine? "Let's search the cabin," I said, trying to focus. "Maybe there's a radio, a phone, something we can use to call for help." We split up, moving quickly. I checked the bedroom, rifling through drawers and under the bed, finding only dusty linens and a rusted fishing knife. Ethan searched the kitchen, his movements frantic. "Caleb," he called suddenly, his voice sharp. I ran to him, heart pounding. He stood by the pantry, pointing at the floor. There, scratched into the wood, was a Symbol crude circle with a slash through it. Like a warning. "This wasn't here when we arrived," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I knelt, touching the mark. It was fresh. The wood still splintered. "Someone's been inside," I said, my stomach churning. The realization hit us both. We weren't alone in the cabin. Not entirely. The scratching on the roof stopped, replaced by a low, guttural hum, like a chant carried on the wind. Ethan grabbed my arm, his grip bruising. "We need to stick together," he said, and I nodded, my fear mirrored in his eyes. We moved to the living room, weapons in hand, and barricaded the door with the couch. The fire was dying, casting long shadows that seemed to writhe. I pulled Ethan close, his warmth grounding me. "I love you," I whispered, the words raw and desperate. "No matter what happens." He kissed me fiercely, his lips trembling. "I love you too. But we're getting out of this. Caleb. We have to." As we held each other, a new sound broke the silencia voice, low and distorted, coming from just outside the door. "You can't hide forever," it said, and my blood ran cold. The voice was familiar, but I couldn't place it. Ethan's face went white, and I knew he recognized it too. The voice lingered in the air, a venomous whisper that seemed to seep through the cabin's walls. Ethan's eyes locked on mine, wide with recognition, but he shook his head slightly, as if begging me not to ask. I wanted to demand answers. Whose voice was that? But the fear in his expression silenced me. "We need to move," I said, my voice low. "Upstairs. Higher ground." Ethan nodded, grabbing the knife from the floor. We crept toward the narrow staircase, the flashlight beam trembling in my hand. Each step creaked, betraying our movement, and I cursed the old cabin's bones. Upstairs was a small loft with a single window, a mattress on the floor, and a trapdoor to the attic. It wasn't much, but it felt safer than the open living room. We crouched in the loft. The storm's roar muffled by the roof. Ethan's breathing was shallow, his knuckles white around the knife. "Caleb," he whispered. "That voice. I think it's—" A loud crash cut him off. The sound of shattering glass from downstairs. My heart lurched. Someone or something had broken in. Footsteps, heavy and deliberate, echoed below, moving through the living room. I clicked off the flashlight, plunging us into darkness, and pulled Ethan close, our bodies pressed against the wall. The footsteps stopped at the base of the stairs. I held my breath, praying they wouldn't climb. Ethan's hand found mine, squeezing hard. Then, a low chuckle drifted up, chilling me to the bone. "I know you're up there," the voice said, now clearer, male, and dripping with malice. It was familiar, maddeningly so, but my mind couldn't place it. Ethan's grip tightened, his whisper barely audible. "It's Mark. My ex." My stomach dropped. Mark. Ethan had mentioned him once, months ago, in a fleeting story about a toxic relationship that ended badly. Mark had been controlling, volatile, a man who didn't take rejection well. But how did he find us? And why now? What does he want? I hissed, my voice shaking. Ethan's eyes glistened with unshed tears. "I don't know. He threatened me when we broke up. Said he'd never let me go. I thought he was bluffing." The footsteps started again, climbing the stairs. My mind raced. We couldn't fight him not without knowing what he was capable of. I scanned the loft, my eyes landing on the trapdoor. "The attic," I whispered. "Now." We scrambled to the trapdoor, pulling it open with a groan. The attic was a cramped, dusty space, smelling of mildew and old wood. We climbed in, pulling the door shut just as the footsteps reached the loft. My heart pounded so loud I was sure Mark could hear it. Ethan's hand trembled in mine, but he stayed silent, his eyes locked on the trapdoor. A floorboard creaked below us. "Come out, Ethan," Mark called, his voice sickeningly sweet. "You can't run from me. Not again." I clenched the poker, ready to swing if he found us. But then another sound, a sharp beep, cut through the tension. Came from Ethan's backpack, forgotten in the corner of the loft. His face went pale. "My phone," he whispered. "I forgot to turn it off." The beeping stopped, but it was too late. The trapdoor rattled as Mark yanked at it. "Gotcha," he said, his voice triumphant. I shoved Ethan behind me, raising the poker, but the door held for now. "We need a way out," I said, scanning the attic. A small vent at the far end caught my eye, barely big enough for us to crawl through. "There," I pointed, moving toward it. The vent was rusted, but I pried it open with the poker, revealing a sheer drop to the ground below. The rain-soaked forest stretched out, dark and endless. "We can't jump," Ethan said, his voice frantic. "It's too high." "We don't have a choice," I said, grabbing his hand. The trapdoor splintered behind us, Mark's curses growing louder. I pushed Ethan toward the vent. "Go. I'm right behind you." He hesitated, his eyes searching mine. "Caleb, if we don't make it, we will." I cut him off, kissing him hard. "Go." Ethan crawled through the vent, his body barely fitting. I followed, the metal scraping my skin as I squeezed through. We dropped onto the wet grass below, pain shooting through my legs. But we were alive. The forest loomed around us, a maze of shadows and rain. We ran, hand in hand, the cabin's lights fading behind us as Mark's shouts echoed in the night. The forest swallowed us whole, its branches clawing at our clothes as we stumbled through the dark. Rain stung my face, and Ethan's hand was slick in mine. But we didn't stop. Behind us, Mark's voice grew fainter, but his threat hung heavy. Predator's promise in the night. "Caleb, slow down." Ethan gasped, his breath ragged. "We need to think." I pulled him behind a massive cedar, its trunk wide enough to shield us. My chest heaved, my lungs burning from the cold air. "He's not giving up," I said, scanning the darkness. "How did he even find us?" Ethan's face was pale, his hair plastered to his forehead. "I don't know. I haven't spoken to him in years. But he's obsessive. He must have been watching me." The thought made my skin crawl. Mark had tracked us to this remote corner of Oregon, turning our sanctuary into a hunting ground. I thought of the note, "Again, leave town or else." Was it Mark's doing? Or was there more to this? The symbol in the cabin, the eyes in the forest, it felt bigger than one man's vendetta. "We can't keep running blind," I said, wiping rain from my eyes. "We need a plan. Somewhere to hide until dawn." Ethan nodded, his jaw set. "There's a ranger station a few miles east. I saw it on the map. If we can get there, we can call for help." It was a long shot, but it was something. We moved again, slower this time, sticking to the shadows. The forest was alive with sounds: crickets, wind, the distant howl of a coyote, but every snap of a twig made my heart race. Ethan stayed close, his shoulder brushing mine, a silent reminder that we were in this together. After what felt like hours, we stumbled onto a narrow dirt trail. It was barely visible, overgrown with ferns, but it led east. "This has to be it," Ethan said, hope flickering in his voice. But as we followed the path, the air grew colder, the trees denser. The trail ended abruptly at a clearing, and in the center stood a crumbling stone structure, half swallowed by vines. "What is this?" I whispered, my flashlight beam sweeping over the ruins. It looked like an old chapel, its windows shattered, its walls etched with the same circle/symbol we'd seen in the cabin. Ethan's breath hitched. "This isn't on the map." Before I could respond, a light flickered in the Distancia flashlight, moving toward us. "Hide," I hissed, pulling Ethan behind a collapsed wall. We crouched low, the wet stone cold against our backs. The light grew closer, accompanied by footsteps and a low hum, the same chant we'd heard before. It wasn't just Mark. There were others. My mind reeled. Was this a cult? A group targeting us for who we were? The thought made my blood boil, but fear kept me still. Ethan's hand found mine, his grip steady despite the terror in his eyes. The figures, three of them, entered the clearing, their faces obscured by hoods. One carried a flashlight, another a rifle. The third was Mark, his voice unmistakable as he spoke. "They're close. Can feel it." I tightened my grip on the poker, My body coiled to fight, but Ethan shook his head, his eyes pleading. "We can't take them," he whispered. "We need to run." He was right, but every instinct screamed to stand and fight, to protect him. The figures moved closer, their light sweeping the ruins. I pulled Ethan deeper into the shadows, our breaths shallow. Then, a new sound, a low growl, not human, coming from the forest behind us. The figures froze, their light swinging toward the noise. "What the hell was that?" one of them muttered. "Now," Ethan whispered. We bolted, using the distraction to sprint back into the forest. The growl grew louder, followed by a scream not ours, but one of the hooded figures. Whatever was out there had turned the hunters into prey. We ran until our legs gave out, collapsing in a thicket of ferns. Ethan clung to me, his body shaking. "What's happening, Caleb?" he asked, his voice breaking. "This isn't just about us anymore." I held him close, my heart pounding. "I don't know," I said, "but we're not giving up. Not on us. Not on anything." As we caught our breath, the forest seemed to watch, the secrets deeper and darker than we'd ever imagined. The forest was a labyrinth of shadows, each tree a silent witness to our desperation. Ethan's hand trembled in mine as we crouched in the ferns, the distant scream still echoing in my ears. Whatever had attacked Mark's group gave us a chance. But it also meant we weren't just running from humans anymore. "We need to keep moving," I whispered, my voice hoarse. "The ranger station. It's our only shot." Ethan nodded, his face pale but resolute. "Okay, but we stay off the trails. They'll expect us to follow them." We crept through the underbrush, avoiding open paths, the rain masking our footsteps. My mind churned with questions. Who were Mark's companions? What was that symbol? And why did it keep appearing? And what was the thing in the woods, growling like a beast from a nightmare? I glanced at Ethan, his jaw set, his eyes scanning the dark. He was stronger than he looked, but I could see the weight of fear pulling at him. "Caleb," he said softly, pausing to catch his breath. "If we don't make it, I need you to know I've never loved anyone like I love you." My throat tightened. "Don't say that. We're getting out of this." I pulled him into a quick, fierce embrace, his warmth anchoring me. "You're my reason, Ethan. We're not losing this." He smiled faintly, but it didn't reach his eyes. We pushed on, the forest growing denser, the air thick with the scent of wet earth and pine. After what felt like miles, we stumbled across a narrow stream, its water glinting in the moonlight. "This could lead to the station," I said, hoping I sounded more confident than I felt. We followed the stream, its gurgle a small comfort against the oppressive silence. But then Ethan froze, grabbing my arm. "Look," he whispered, pointing to the muddy bank. Footprints human, fresh, and too large to be ours. They led into the water, disappearing downstream. "They're tracking us," I said, my heart sinking. Mark and his group, or whatever was left of them, were still out there. I tightened my grip on the poker, scanning the trees. The forest felt alive, watching, waiting. "Let's cross the stream," Ethan suggested. "It might throw them off." We waded through the icy water, our shoes sinking into the muck. On the other side, we climbed a steep embankment, thorns snagging our clothes. At the top, we found a small cave, its entrance hidden by vines. It wasn't much, but it was shelter. We crawled inside, huddling together to share warmth. Inside, the cave was damp but quiet. The storm's roar muffled. I set the flashlight between us, its dim light casting shadows on the jagged walls. Ethan leaned against me, his head on my shoulder. "Do you think we're safe here?" he asked. "For now," I said, though I didn't believe it. I reached into my pocket, pulling out the crumpled note I'd kept hidden. "Ethan, this note is not just about us being together. It feels like something bigger." He took the note, his eyes scanning the scrawled words. "Leave town or else." His voice trembled. Mark used to say things like this. He'd leave notes when we fought, little threats to keep me in line. But this is different, organized. Before I could respond, a faint scratching came from the cave entrance. My heart stopped. I clicked off the flashlight, plunging us into darkness. Ethan's breath hitched, his hand gripping mine. The scratching grew louder, closer, then stopped. Silence stretched, unbearable. Then, a whisper, not Mark's voice, but a woman's, soft and eerie. "They're in here," she said, "just outside the cave." I grabbed the poker, my body tense. Ethan pressed against me, his knife ready. The vines at the entrance rustled, and a shadow loomed. I raised the poker, ready to strike, but Ethan grabbed my arm. "Wait," he hissed. "Listen." The woman's voice came again, now joined by another man's, not Mark's. "They're not worth it," he said. "The ritual's what matters." Ritual. My blood ran cold. This wasn't just about Mark's obsession. It was something darker, something we'd stumbled into by chance, or had we? I thought of the symbol, the chant, the eyes in the forest. We weren't just running from a jealous ex. We were caught in something ancient, something evil. The voices faded, their footsteps retreating. Ethan's grip on my arm didn't loosen. "Caleb," he whispered, "what the hell have we walked into?" The cave was a tomb of silence after the voices faded. But the word ritual hung heavy, a blade over our heads. Ethan's eyes searched mine in the dark, his fear mirroring my own. We were no longer just fighting for our lives, we were caught in a web we didn't understand. "We can't stay here," I whispered, my voice barely audible. "They know we're close." Ethan nodded, his face grim. "The ranger station. We have to keep moving." We crawled out of the cave, the rain lighter now but still relentless. The forest was a maze, but the stream was our guide. We moved silently, every rustle making us flinch. My mind raced, piecing together fragments, the symbol, the chant, the ritual. Was Mark leading this? Or was he just a pawn? And why us? Was it because of who we were? Or had we simply been in the wrong place at the wrong time? The stream widened, leading to a gravel road, sign of civilization. My heart lifted, but Ethan grabbed my arm, pointing to the ground. More footprints, fresh and scattered, as if a group had passed through recently. "They're ahead of us," he said, his voice tight. We veered off the road, sticking to the trees. But the sense of being hunted grew stronger. The forest seemed to pulse, the air thick with an unnatural weight. Then we saw it, a faint glow through the trees, flickering like a fire. We crept closer, hiding behind a fallen log. In a clearing stood a circle of stones, each marked with the circle symbol. A fire burned in the center, surrounded by 5 figures in hooded cloaks, their faces hidden. Mark was among them, his voice low as he spoke words we couldn't hear. "It's a cult," Ethan whispered, his voice shaking. "They're doing something." I squinted, my heart pounding. The figures were arranging objects around the fire candles. Bones. A small knife glinting with dark stains. My stomach churned. This wasn't just about us. It was something bigger. Something that made the forest itself feel alive with malice. "We need to get past them," I said, my voice steady despite the fear clawing at me. "The station can't be far." Ethan nodded, but his eyes were fixed on the fire. "Caleb, look," he whispered, pointing. One of the figures held a photograph, its edges curling in the heat. Even from a distance, I recognized Itis, laughing at a diner last month, oblivious to the camera. Someone had been watching us long before this trip. Anger surged through me, hot and fierce. They weren't just hunting us, they were targeting us. Our love, our existence. I grabbed Ethan's hand, pulling him back. "We're not their prey," I said. "We're getting out, and we're exposing this." We moved silently, circling the clearing, keeping the fire's glow at our backs. The ranger station appeared through the trees, a small wooden building with a single light burning inside. Relief flooded me, but it was short-lived. As we approached, the door swung open, and a figure stepped out, not a ranger, but another hooded figure, rifle in hand. We dropped to the ground, hearts pounding. "They've got the station," Ethan whispered, his voice breaking. "What now?" I scanned the area, spotting a shed nearby, its door ajar. "There," I said, pointing. We crawled toward it, slipping inside. The shed was cramped, filled with tools and a dusty radio. I grabbed the radio, praying it worked. Static crackled as I turned the dial, but a voice broke through, a ranger, asking for identification. "Help," I whispered, keeping my voice low. "We're at the East Station. People are after us. Please, hurry." The ranger's voice was calm but urgent. "Stay put. We're sending a team. Can you describe?" The radio cut off, a loud crack echoing outside. Ethan grabbed my arm, his eyes wide. "They're here," he said. I peeked through a crack in the shed wall. 2 figures approached, their flashlights sweeping the ground. Mark's voice carried, sharp and angry. "Find them. They can't ruin this." I turned to Ethan, my heart racing. "We fight," I said, grabbing a shovel from the shed. "For us. For everything." He nodded, his fear giving way to resolve. "Together," he said, and we braced ourselves, ready to face whatever came next. The shed was a fragile fortress, its walls creaking under the wind's assault. Ethan clutched the knife, his eyes locked on the door, while I gripped the shovel, its weight grounding me. Outside, Mark's voice grew closer, barking orders to the others. "Check the shed," he said, his tone cold and commanding. "They're coming," Ethan whispered, his voice steady despite the fear in his eyes. "What's the plan?" I glanced around the shed, my mind racing. A rusty axe hung on the wall, and a coil of rope lay in the corner. "We can't fight them head-on," I said. "But we can outsmart them. Trap them." Ethan nodded, catching my drift. We worked quickly, tying the rope across the doorway at ankle height. A crude tripwire. I grabbed the axe, its blade dull but heavy, and handed Ethan a crowbar from the tool pile. "If they get in, we hit hard and run," I said. The door rattled, a flashlight beam slicing through the cracks. I held my breath, my heart pounding. Ethan pressed against me, his warmth a lifeline. The door swung open, and a hooded figure stepped in, tripping over the rope and crashing to the floor. I swung the shovel, catching him in the shoulder. He grunted, dropping his flashlight, which spun wildly across the shed. "Go," I shouted, pushing Ethan toward the door. We leapt over the fallen figure, sprinting into the rain-soaked night. Shouts erupted behind us, Mark's voice rising above the rest. "Don't let them escape." We ran toward the ranger station, its light a beacon in the dark. But as we reached the door, another figure emerged, rifle raised. I tackled Ethan to the ground just as a shot rang out, the bullet grazing a tree. We scrambled behind a stack of firewood, my heart in my throat. "Caleb," Ethan gasped, his hand clutching my arm. "We can't keep running." "I know," I said, my mind racing. The station was compromised, but the radio had gotten through. Help was coming if we could hold out. I peeked over the firewood, spotting Mark and two others closing in, their flashlights cutting through the rain. "We need a diversion," I said, scanning the area. A gas can sat by the station's wall, likely for a generator. It was risky, but it was our only shot. "Stay here," I told Ethan, crawling toward the can. My hands shook as I unscrewed the cap, the sharp smell of gasoline filling the air. I poured a trail along the ground, leading away from the station, then struck a match from my pocket. The flames roared to life, a blazing line cutting through the dark. The figures shouted, their flashlights swinging toward the fire. Ethan grabbed my hand, and we bolted into the forest, the chaos buying us seconds. We ran until we found a ditch, diving into it and covering ourselves with leaves. Minutes passed, the fire's glow fading in the distance. Mark's voice grew faint, replaced by the sound of sirens' rangers. Finally, Ethan's breath was ragged beside me, his hand still in mine. "We made it," he whispered, but his voice was heavy with doubt. The sirens grew louder, and flashlight beams swept the forest. "This is the Oregon State Rangers," a voice called. "Come out with your hands up." We crawled out of the ditch, raising our hands. Two rangers approached, their faces stern but kind. "You the ones who called?" one asked, lowering his rifle. "Yes," I said, my voice cracking. "There's a group after us. They're dangerous." The ranger nodded, speaking into his radio. "We've got them. Send backup." He turned to us, his eyes softening. "You're safe now." But as they led us to their truck, Ethan's grip on my hand tightened. "Caleb," he whispered, "that symbol is not over. They'll come for us again." I looked into his eyes, seeing the same fear and determination I felt. "Let them try," I said. "We've got each other." The Rangers drove us to safety, but the forest's shadows lingered, a reminder that our fight for love, for survival, was far from over. The ranger station's fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a harsh glow over Ethan and me as we sat wrapped in blankets, our clothes still damp from the rain. The Rangers had taken our statements, their faces a mix of skepticism and concern as we described the hooded figures, the symbol, and Mark's obsession. My body ached, but Ethan's hand in mine kept me grounded, a silent promise that we'd survive the night. "Caleb," Ethan said softly, his voice raw from exhaustion. "What do we do now?" I looked at him, his hazel eyes tired but fierce, and felt a surge of love so strong it hurt. "We live," I said. "We keep fighting for us, for the truth." The Rangers had found the clearing, the stones, the remnants of the fire, but the figures were gone, vanished into the forest like ghosts. Mark was among the missing, his fate unknown. The symbol circle with a slash was linked to an old cult, the Rangers said, one tied to disappearances in the Cascades decades ago. They promised to investigate, but their words felt hollow. This wasn't over. A ranger approached, a woman with kind eyes. "You're free to go," she said, handing us dry clothes. "But stay vigilant. We'll contact you if we find anything." We nodded, too drained to argue. Outside, dawn broke over the mountains, the sky a soft pink that felt like a betrayal after the night's terror. We climbed into a ranger's truck, headed back to Portland. Ethan leaned against me, his head on my shoulder, and I kissed his forehead, savoring the warmth of him. "Caleb," he murmured, "I'm sorry I didn't tell you about Mark, about how bad it was." I squeezed his hand. "You don't have to apologize. We're here now. That's what matters." But as we drove, the note burned in my mind: leave town or else. The cult, Mark, the ritual, it was all connected, and we were still in their sights. I thought of the photograph, our faces smiling in the diner, unaware of the danger. Someone had been watching us, planning this. But why? Was it our love, our defiance of a world that wanted us hidden? Or was it something deeper, something tied to the forest's secrets? Back in Portland, we returned to my small apartment, the familiar creak of the floorboards a comfort. But the world felt different now, sharper, more dangerous. Ethan stood by the window, staring at the city below. "What if they find us again?" he asked, his voice small. I crossed the room, wrapping my arms around him. "Then we face them together," I said. "No more hiding. No more running." He turned, his eyes searching mine. "You mean that?" "With everything I've got," I said, and kissed him, slow and deep, pouring every ounce of love and resolve into it. We'd been through hell, but we'd come out stronger, our bond forged in fire. Days later, we sat in a coffee shop, the same one from the photograph, The Rangers had found no trace of Mark or the others. But the investigation was ongoing. Ethan reached across the table, his fingers lacing with mine, unashamed despite the curious glances from other patrons. "We're not just surviving," he said, a smile breaking through. "We're living." I grinned, my heart full. Damn right. The world still had its shadows, its threats, the secrets. But as we sat there, hand in hand, I knew we'd face them all. Our love was our strength, our defiance, our reason to keep going. And no cult, no forest, no hate could take that away.